You got to have, it's a different skill set. It might be in the same, general industry, but it's a whole different set of people with a whole different mindset, with a whole different level, working with different money. And if you've only been in residential real estate your whole life and you want to try to make a transition to commercial real estate, you're in for a shock. Right. And I know I just have a ton of friends in real estate. It's like, I've researched this. I hear this a lot from them. And it's the same thing kind of happens when you go from agency owner to acquiring more agencies. It's a completely different game. Where we come up with.
This is Christian D. Evans coming at you, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast host. We're very excited about open enrollment for our exclusive Be Uncommon Mastermind. Now, this has never been before open to the public. It has just been exclusive, but I'm opening it because I realize a lot of 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs that are listening to our podcast really desire to network, connect, and collaborate with our guest. And so in order to do that, you're talking Pascal Bachman, which has run a mid 8-figure business. We talk Vinny Fisher, 4-time 8-figure business owner, Nick Cavuto, that has incredible network with like Gary Vaynerchuk, Tony Robbins, so forth, Mandy Ellefson, J.C. Granger, David Valentine, and so many more. You have an opportunity right now to take a look at our Be Uncommon Mastermind, where you can connect, collaborate, partner, and learn from the best in the industry. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Now, go to christiandevans.com/mastermind-now and be able to apply. You'll have a conversation with me. We'll see if you apply. We're only taking 30 slots right now. Guys, that is Christian D. Evans podcast /mastermind-now. That link is in the description below. Guys, enjoy the episode, and remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, Christian D. Evans. And guys, we have someone very special on, because not only is a massive, incredible marketing agency and digital marketer and growth marketer, but also he's actually doing something that I think a lot of business owners that we want to, we desire it, we think about it, but we never actually explode it. And we are going to be talking about acquisition channels, but larger channels, as in like acquiring actual larger companies. And the reason why we need to talk about this and bring this up is because, see, that's really how you explode. That's how you massively explode to higher levels beyond 10, 8, 9, 10 figures. And so, guys, this man right here is the owner and the agency owner of an Infinity Marketing Group. He's got energized, empowering tech companies to grow while driving his exponential digital sales success with practical marketing methods. He actually grew up in Silicon Valley, and with a strong impression of the importance of technology in business and innovation. Please welcome my next guest, J.C. Granger. My man, how you doing?
Hey, Christian, how are you?
Very good. Hey, I'm very excited about talking about, not only marketing and sales and systems and process, the importance of it, but also something that you wanted to take on here in 2022. And obviously your big focus is, acquisition and so forth, which I think is just really remarkable, because a lot of companies are looking in that avenue, but they don't know exactly how to. So before we dive into this, though, kind of tell me, like, what is your massive experience? Obviously being able, explode your company to the levels it is now, and now having this opportunity to talk about acquisition.
Well, someone once told me the only way to get 20 years experience is to have 20 years experience. There's no shortcuts, right? It's just a matter of just doing it for a long time. I've been in digital marketing about 22 years now. I've owned an agency for a little over 12. So, really, you get to a certain point where you're like, okay, well, what now? You're either going to sell or you're going to expand. And I'm not ready to sell yet. So we decided to expand. And you can do that organically through your own company and add on services and stuff. But I really got turned on to the concept of, well, I guess, empire building. People throw that term around a lot. They're like, I'm building my empire. But if you really think about it, the only way to really build an empire is to either create multiple companies from the ground up or to acquire them. And growth through acquisition can be a faster path, although risky, right? You might buy the wrong thing too. But if you're really going to build an empire, that's where you got to start. You got to start gobbling up market share and acquiring more companies to put under your umbrella.
Well, I do know the importance of it, because I remember, obviously the importance of Facebook buying Instagram, right? They saw something. Google did the exact same thing at acquiring YouTube, right? And it was during that time, those are small little companies, had 7 or 10, 15 people running that massive company, and they bought it for several billion. And the reason why is because they see that bigger potential. Now, also, I do know that my question, I guess, JC, is when you look at a company to acquire, what are certain things that you're looking for? Is it more of the list, the customer list? Or is it more of, okay, the assets that they have, the availability, the infrastructure that they have? What exactly do you look at? And I would imagine it probably depends, but I'd love to get kind of your perspective on
Sure.
that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things to look for right away, and standard, no matter what company I'm looking at for it. One is I'm looking for cash flow. I want to know that if I were to change nothing, would it still make money positively tomorrow, so to speak, right? So that's my first checkbox. I want to make sure that if I did nothing, now I plan on doing things, obviously, but I want to know worst case scenario. The second thing I'm looking for, specifically with agencies, I want to know are they retainer based or project based? I can tell you that retainer based is more attractive because it's more of a guaranteed cash flow coming forward than project. It doesn't mean that you don't have a company that, like a website agency, for example, is obviously gonna be project based for the most part. But what I'm looking for is how consistent are they able to get business if I'm going to go that route? And then also, are they capitalizing on things you can make residual money on, like hosting, for example? Are they pulling those kind of triggers? Are they upselling it SEO on the side? Things like that. So mostly I want to look at long-term contracts though. That's a big green flag for me, is long-term contracts. So if it's a social media agency or an SEO agency, if they're like, we're month to month, I'm not arguing with that. And I can see a benefit to that, especially in the sales process, when you can tell a client, hey, we're not going to lock you in. But from an acquisition standpoint, someone who's about to spend millions of dollars and be in the red basically immediately, coming into this, it's really important from a risk assessment standpoint from our end that we know that there's a positive cash flow and that we can guarantee a certain amount of money coming in for a certain amount of time at least, right? If we mess it up after that, well, that's on us, right? But if we acquire an agency that has 6 or 12-month contracts, that makes us feel a lot safer. And an agency like that can typically demand a little more money in their sale because they know that it's less risky because there's some guarantees kind of built in.
So when you're looking at like acquiring a company, are you looking specifically? Are you really niching down and say, okay, I want a million, $2 million business. They already have it, digital marketing agency, and then that's who I want to acquire. Are you looking at kind of the bigger animals? And hey, you know what? I want someone that's a little bit bigger. They're bigger than us, and that we want to pull them underneath our wing a little bit, or maybe have some sort of partnership and kind of a long-term contract. What does that look like?
So in this stage that we're in right now, we're looking in that kind of anywhere from that $1 to $6 or $7 million range as far as total acquisition cost. Now, how that deal is done, there's a million different ways to put a deal together, but that's kind of our sweet spot. Now, that being said, you come across a bigger deal, let's say it's 10 million, but you just can't pass it up. Maybe it's a divorce between two owners. This happens, right? Sometimes it's a forced sale and they have to dump it fast. So they're not going for, 4 or 5X. They're going maybe for 1.5X to get rid of it. That's what I like to call best on board. It's a draft term for anyone listening who likes football, right? There's who you want in your draft. And then if that person's gone, you're like, well, we can't get what we wanted. You just take the best on the board, basically the best player. So sometimes you come across a situation where you just can't pass it up because it's a good deal and you can make it work. But I think it's important for people who are going to be doing acquisitions, and this is what we're doing, is we have an end goal. So I have an end goal. I have a 5-year and out plan. As of today, that could change, right? But as of today, I have a 5-year and out plan, and I want to package certain agencies together that I know target the same demographic, that specialize in different verticals. Because if I can go buy all those and I package them up together in a nice black box with a pink ribbon around it, it's much easier to sell that as a package, and you get a higher multiple when you sell it off to a much bigger company, because really it's just bigger fish eating smaller fish when it comes to this.
So when you're looking at that, because to me, I look at it like almost buying real estate, right? If you look at real estate, it's very similar kind of process. And so a lot of times you look for companies that are, or like houses that are in kind of the rougher, kind of situations, right? Off the market, if you will. So my question is, JC, what is your outreach to be able to find those deals, right? Find those that are like, hey, you know what? Like you said, there's a divorce between partners. There's, and they just want to get out, and those are the best deals. Where do you find those? How do you find those? And how do you, what does that
Yeah.
look like?
I mean, there's 2 ways, obviously, to deals. The easiest way is through brokers, but that has some catches to it. A broker they usually want a straight up kind of sale so they can make their commission, right? There are some brokers out there that don't mind what deal is put together because they have some sort of back end deal on their compensation with the client. And those, if you can find those are really good to deal with. But typically, brokers are gonna be like, hey, here's the price, and they want a quick sale. They don't want you to do anything like earnouts or anything like that. So that's a little more difficult. So the way to get the off market ones, and we're lucky in the sense that we are already my agency is a lead generation company, so we specialize in LinkedIn and paid ads and email marketing specifically for lead generation. Now, why that works for this is because the same process that we use to drive leads for our clients, we can actually clone that entire process to reach out to agency owners just directly and say, hey, are you looking at selling, right? And you just never know. Most are going to say no. And actually, I say most just won't reply. But some will say no, and some will say, well, I could, what are you offering, right? And then you start the conversation. You just never know what's out there. So those off-market deals are easier to put together. I will say that off-market deals, sometimes there's a tendency for the agency owner to believe that their company is worth more than it is. Typically, the good side of when you go through them, if you're going through a broker, is the broker's probably already given them some down to earth advice in like the real world, like this is really how it works, here's really how the math works, here's really what you're worth, right? We're going to try to get you more, but this is really what you're worth. So they've already had that conversation, whereas if you go to off market deals, they haven't. So you're just the guy giving them the bad news, saying like I know you think it's worth 10 million, but it's really worth 5. So there's pros and cons.
Because, and I love what you're saying there, because that's with even in real estate, that's with anything, right? Everybody always wants more than really what it's worth, and blah blah blah. And my question though with this, because I always think it's a very strategic approach. Definitely when you have cash, sitting cash, where you can obviously leverage it, and you can obviously acquire those other businesses. Now with that, and I think you mentioned something, but I want to kind of emphasize this a little bit. When you're looking at this kind of niche, do you sub niche? Like, okay, I'm only looking for agencies that are digital marketing that are in the advertising space, specifically Facebook. And then maybe, and as well as their client base, right? Maybe, you don't want their client base. Maybe that's an agency, but maybe they just focus on doctors or the health industry. Maybe, like, I'm just curious, like, because I think that's very, very viable and very good information, because all the numbers and the project looks good, but it's like, okay, what's your list? What does that look like? What's your client base? And as well as, hey, are they SEO, specific? Are they, website specific? What does that look like? And how can it add value to their business? But also, my question to you, JC, is like, do you want to add another like channel of product and service, or would you rather just focus on the same product and service that you're really good at, and then acquire those kind of companies?
Yeah, so for me personally, you could do it either way. You can say, hey, I'm going to buy up a bunch of paid advertising agencies, right? Maybe you're just someone who specializes in that, and you want to buy up a bunch because you understand it better. And there's a huge value to that, right? For us personally, for me, I'm actually going demographic, target client niche, which means that right now we specialize in B2B tech companies, right? So we do lead generation for software companies, IT services, things like that. I want to start buying up agencies that specialize in we're lead generation. So I want to go after agencies that specialize in other services, let's say like an SEO agency, but they focus on B2B tech. So I'm trying to acquire more agencies that have the same target audience, so that ultimately what I'm doing is I'm packaging a target audience package, essentially, right? So I want to go after an SEO company that specializes in B2B tech, a social media company that specializes in B2B tech, right? Again, but if I get something that comes across my plate that's too good, to pass up, best on board, I'll entertain it. I had one that just came across my plate the other day. It's actually a local agency here where I'm at in Denver, and they were sitting at a 1.5x, ask, and their cash flow looks really good. I mean, they're kind of full service, right? But it's best on board, right? Like I can't pass up the opportunity to at least look at, a valuation like that and see if there's something we can do with it. But ultimately, my real goal is to buy up other agencies that focus in the same target demographic that we focus in.
So it's mostly demographic more so than adding or subtracting services. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, that's our play. I mean, there's equal value in buying up a bunch of SEO agencies, as, buying up the service rather than the demographic. We just want to buy up the demographic.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Because I had one friend of mine. Now that we're talking about this and having this conversation, he was saying that okay, hey, he had a podcast, and he was just talking about side hustles and stuff like that. And then what happened? It grew to a beautiful amount of listeners and stuff like that. Acquired some capital, and then took that capital to be able to buy I think it was Side Hustle Home, sidehustle.com, something along that line. It was a website. We had a lot of just organic traffic. And then what was incredible is it became a beautiful email list. He got all these assets and stuff like that. And he was able to obviously sell his own service and shenanigans like that. And I always just find it very interesting, definitely in the informational space or even in the digital marketing space, acquiring these different specific companies that really identifying the valuation and saying, what is that ultimate goal? What's that result that you really want to, work on? So, I like to talk a little bit about the way you came about this, your decision. Where are you at in your company that says, okay, you know what, I can now focus my attention on this? Because some individuals, they still need to just focus on that one or two acquisition channels and drive some sales and fulfillment. Some people are in a situation where, okay, you got all the C-level execs in place, and then you can start focusing on that. I'd love to get your response on like, okay, where do you need to be to say, okay, now my focus and my attention can be on this, and I can be really good at it.
I mean, you got to have, if you currently own an agency, you really have a few options. Either A, you can sell your current agency first, which gives you some capital to play with and time, right? Because you don't have a job, so to speak. Now you can go into acquisitions full time. That's your first option. Sell yours first. Your second option is to make sure that you have hired the right people to take over most of your day-to-day tasks, right? So if you're only working a couple hours a day, well, you got plenty of time now to go into acquisitions, because that's going to eat up a good amount of time if you're doing it right? If you're giving it the attention, because you shouldn't just be laser focused on one particular company. You need to have, 10 irons in the fire, because a lot of these deals are going to fall apart. They're just going to fall apart for whatever reason, not necessarily bad reasons. Sometimes the owners change their minds. Sometimes you just can't come to an agreement on the numbers. Sometimes you find something in due diligence that's a huge red flag, and you're like, I'm out. You can't be emotionally attached to any one acquisition. So you have to have as many going as you can, so that your brain is not trying to make one work, right? So that second option is giving yourself enough time by having your own people take over more of your day-to-day tasks. And then the last option is just kind of winding your own agency down. Maybe just stop selling. Maybe you're just like, okay, we have enough cash flow. We have enough retainer clients. We're making enough money. I'm not going to sell what I'm doing anymore. We're just going to keep it, I'll let my staff take care of what's going on. And then I'm going to focus, over here for this. What I'm doing personally is I kind of have, I'm handing off a lot of my day-to-day tasks to my people, because I don't want to get rid of Infinity, because it's a lead generation company for B2B tech. And one of the things that I found when looking at the room for improvement areas of agencies that are for sale, most of their issues center around their own lead generation. They're usually very good at executing whatever their service is, right, for their clients. I find that a lot of agencies are actually not that great at driving their own leads. And since we specialize in that, we become that thing that can be inserted into each new acquisition to help scale it up after we buy it, because we already know how to drive leads, right? So I'm keeping mine. I'm not going to sell mine. I'm just going to let it be used to help the other ones grow.
See, I love that. I really love that approach. Definitely when you have a proprietary system like you do, and you're not afraid of, like, you have a skill and you've obviously been able to use that at a high level. Now you're able to find really people that just don't really like the game or whatever the case may be, and acquire those and obviously scale that now, which makes sense. That's the whole goal behind it. And it's really good. I think you mentioned something that was really important, JC, in regards to kind of like, you got to be in the right spot, cash flow wise, as well as business wise. So what made you decide to, instead of just focusing on, building a referral system, or, going organic or SEO or that side, to just, acquiring?
I mean, I wanted to step on the gas. It's coming out of the pandemic. The pandemic did a lot of things mentally and emotionally to everyone, and everyone kind of was affected a little bit differently. For me, I was like, you know what, if I'm going to create something that I can pass on, to my daughter, or for our foundation, because I want to start a foundation, things like that as well. I'm like, those kind of events just remind you, like, how fast time goes, how, like, tomorrow is not guaranteed, kind of thing. So I'll be honest, I think I got into that mode when I was like, you know what? I can keep going at this pace, or I can step on the gas and go for the big wins, right? And it's a personality type thing too. Remember, if you're someone who thrives in execution, if you really like doing the thing that your agency was built from, so if you were an SEO expert and you built your agency because you liked being, hands-on and in the trenches and doing it, then acquisition is probably isn't for you, right? If you're more of a top-down broad manager mentality like I am, that's when that becomes something that's more viable, because you you're going to acquire something for a lot of money and there's already a set staff already there. It's You can't really go in and say, okay, I'm gonna do all this work now. It's like, no, you just basically traded one agency for another. No one has that kind of time, right? So you have to go in, and if you have the personality where you can look at things from the top down, if you're that broad spectrum thinker, if you're good at management and high level stuff, but you really suck at the super intricate details like I do, then, because you can't have both, right? Your brain's not gonna do both. It's either really good at high level or it's really good at the minutia. I'm not good at the minutia. I've got people for that. I hire people who are very good at the minutia. But if you're a high level thinker, and that's kind of where I think it's best. But for me, it was just like, hey, anything could happen. So if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it now, and I want to do it fast. And the quickest way to grow that quote empire is acquisitions. And I like the top down view of things. I like being able to move the pieces on the board.
So when you're saying empire, because I love what you're saying there, because it just makes perfect sense to me. And now I've never, had any acquisition at all on my end. A lot of things that I built were just, from the ground up and so forth. And so I just never, wanted to have that, acquisition. I sold a company and so forth. And so I'm focusing on my podcast and other things. But the reason why I'm saying this is because, see, when you're talking about kind of this process, this system a little bit, what are certain red flags that you should be very aware of and very cognizant of by approaching this? Because everybody, and I've noticed this just in business, everybody's okay with taking your money, and you have to be very cognizant of it. So what are some red flags? And then, as well as a caveat question, is how have you been able to switch your mind, or give me some examples of how your mindset has had to switch going from business owner to, hey, acquisition kind of business owner?
Yeah. So red flags wise, one thing I look for, and this is not going to sound like a red flag. It's going to sound like something really great for an agency, but it's not great from an acquisition standpoint. If an agency is crushing it, right? They are streamlined, right? They have a good marketing budget. They have a great ROI. Their SEO is good. They've got a good paid. I mean, just if everything, they're streamlined. They're not overly bloated with a huge giant office that they don't need. If all those things are like, for when you own the agency, these things you want to kind of do. But from acquiring it, I'm looking for ways I can improve this agency. Right now, that's just me. Remember, there are bigger companies that want fully streamlined agencies already in place, so they don't have to do anything, and that's fine. But when I'm looking to buy one, I want to buy one that I can actually make improvements on. Ironically, I'm looking for things that they're doing wrong and they're still making money. That's a huge green flag for me. If they have a bunch of gaps and they're still profitable, that's something that I want, right? But if they don't have any gaps, if they're crushing it and they're streamlined and they're efficient, and they have the CEO has a low salary, and things I can't move around, I'm like, well, what am I mean, yeah, I could buy it, but I can't really fine tune it. I can't scale it. And I want to buy things that I can double, triple the revenue on by filling in those gaps that maybe they like lead generation, for example. Or if they had 3 owners who were taking 200 grand a piece, that's 600 grand a year I can put back into marketing and fill in other holes to help it scale faster, right? I can, pay a sales team, things like that. So ironically for me personally, a red flag is a company doing almost too well, right? But again, there's a bigger company out there that would absolutely love to buy them. It's not what we're looking for. But as far as traditional red flags, there's a lot of that comes in the due diligence. I don't like when I see overly inflated projected income for next year. I see that a lot. I see a lot of people who say, well, we did this much this year, and this year, but next year it's going to go up to here. And it's like, well, okay, but if it was going to go up to there in 12 months, why are you selling, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's one thing if it had already been exponential the last 2-3 years, right? And then that next projection was mathematically feasible to that. A red flag that I see is when they're flatlined for a couple of years, and all of a sudden they say, well, our next year is going to be this. It's like, why do you think that? Like, you haven't proven that at all. You're kind of just saying it because, and what I find is a lot of them say it because maybe they streamlined some process, or they got a big new client, right? That's going to pay them a lot, which is fine. But that brings you to another red flag. How heavy are you on any one or two particular clients, right? So if you have, if 80% of your cash flow is it's Costco, because you nailed a whale early on, but they're taking so much of your time and resources, which happens a lot, by the way. And they know they can, because if they know they're 80% of your business, they can ask for the world and you're going to give it to them, right? And this is a trap that a lot of agencies get into. So if I see that they're too heavy of their cash flow on one or two particular clients, for example, on a small amount, and they don't have enough spread out between other clients, huge red flag for me. Because if those guys leave, then the company almost goes bankrupt. And even if they don't leave, the amount of attention and time and labor that they can demand and get away with it, because they know that if they leave, you go bankrupt. I don't want to enter into that kind of situation.
You bring up some amazing valid points, and my question a little bit more detailed. Okay, so let's say you get into some sort of agreement, right? Because I always think it kind of coming back to like the mindset and the perspective, because you do have to come in with a different perspective. So I want to ask you, now that you kind of get into this, now you're learning, now you're acquiring these companies, how has your mindset switched? And I'm talking, I would imagine when you're acquiring a company, you can't think 12 months time frame. You can't even think 18 months. You have to think 3, 5, maybe 6 years outward, right?
Mhm.
And understand, okay, hey, like you said at the beginning, you're in the red. I'm curious how long you should be expecting to be in the red until you're in the black. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, you're in the red because you just obviously paid out more money than it's making, but it's kind of like you're a real estate person, right? There's good debt, there's bad debt, right? If I've got a $300,000 mortgage, because I bought the house, okay, sure, but it's gaining in value, and every month I'm paying down the mortgage. I'm not paying rent to someone else, so to speak, right? So as long as the cash flow is positive and there's no reason for us to see why it would change dramatically in the short term, then it's still good debt, right? Especially depending on how you put the deal together. And that's a whole different conversation. You can spend 2 hours talking about all the different ways to put a deal together, right? There's seller finance, there's traditional bank. You can do a combination of the two. You can do earnouts, where they stay on for a while. But my mindset has changed in the sense that I'm really, like I said, I'm looking at the numbers, but the numbers are only part of that equation. I'm looking at it to see, how long do I have with this person on as well? Because I want to keep the owner on for a little bit so that the transition is smooth. That's the hardest part. If they say, listen, I'm selling it to you today and I'm gone tomorrow, well, we're not interested in that, right? So typically what I look for is someone who's willing to stay on for about 6 months to a year, depending, right? So that while they're still keeping the show running well, and incentivize them, they're still getting paid. There's be bonuses for them too. Like, they'll have an incentive to keep the ship running well, obviously. And typically we can pay them more for the overall sale that way as well. So my attitude has shifted more toward the safety net, right? Whereas as an agency, I'm really risky. I make big risky moves, right? Go big, go home kind of thing. That's just my style, right? Like, I lose a lot of money on experiments, but when one of them hits, I make it all back and then some, right? When I'm doing acquisitions, it's not you're trying to do a lot safer play, right? Because you're not in the nitty gritty, you're not in the minutia, you're not doing the day to day yourself. So I do big risks because I can control the outcome for the most part, right? Because I'm the one actually playing with whatever it is. Maybe it's a new software, maybe it's a new pricing system, whatever I want to do. But if I'm acquiring an agency, I need things to be safe and calm, right? So it's a completely different mindset, which has actually been harder for me to adapt to. I'll be honest, because I'm a high risk, high reward person. The reason why earlier I said you've got to have as many potential deals going at once as you can until one closes is because if you don't, and you have a personality like mine, you might jump the gun and buy one that you shouldn't, because it's the only one on the table, and you're like, I can make that work. Right? It's like, that mentality is awesome for a lot of things, but I don't think it's that great for acquisitions, because you can be left holding the bag on something that goes south after the deal signed. You know what I mean? So that's been a very big change for me, is looking at the safer plays long term, where I'm usually more short term, high risk, high reward.
Well, that's when I was listening to an interview by Warren Buffett, and he said something. Whenever he acquires a company, whenever he's looking at fully acquire it, at such a high level, right? He's always looking at keeping the team in place, right? And so, kind of caveat on what you were talking about, you like to keep the owner on for about 6 to 12 months. Obviously, basically take on all the risk, and he just gets paid really, and a really good situation. However, though, you know, you said something was very interesting because it was like, okay, I look at the numbers, that's part of it, but also I look at the infrastructure of the people as well. And
Mhm.
so, what kind of emphasis, I guess, is it 50-50? Is it 60-40? What would you say is one or the other where you put emphasis, or it just depends? Or I like to get kind of your response when you're looking at those, you know, itemized situations.
Yeah, I mean, it does depend, but I'll give you a scenario. Let's say the cash flow is amazing, right? And let's say I see some holes in there that I can fix super fast. I'm like, I can take this company to 2x what they're at now in 8 months. Let's say I can project that in my head because I'm just staring at it. Like I can see the matrix in this, right? But let's say that I hear that the staff is, jittery and they only like to working for that one person and they don't want to sell, so they're high risk to leave. Okay, if the cash on the money and outweigh that risk, I don't mind if that happens because I have the resources and the ability to hire fast. I can replace a whole team very fast. I don't want to though. My optimal version is the team just stays there, right? But if they don't have a good infrastructure when it comes to that, we are the whole point of acquiring is that you already have resources in place to do that. So one of my partners is really good at the HR side and the money side. So they are good at streamlining those types of things. They can bring in people fast if they need to. So you got to come in prepared, knowing what could go wrong and know that you could react fast to it. Right. Because it could be a domino effect, right? If the owner leaves quick and then the top level people leave quick, then the lower people leave quick. And you're sitting here trying to play whack-a-mole. You're trying to replace people as they leave. And then you have to remember too, is well, how deep was the relationship between the account managers and the clients, and are the clients going to leave? Can they leave? This is where we go back to the whole retainer. If they're month to month and they had great relationships for years, they might not stay with the company because they actually like working with those people, right? So all of a sudden everything just tail spins out of control and you're losing all this money and you're kind of stuck with nothing, which is why if I'm going to go into a situation where I think the infrastructure is shaky, but if I have good cash flow and long-term contracts, I can deal with it, right? So I have to have enough things outweighing that. So it does depend, but that's just like one scenario that I can give you right now where I would make an exception and say, okay, it's shaky, but, right? But if it's shaky and, well, I don't want and, I want but, so that's how I look at it.
So, and because this is a whole new field, and a lot of times you have to be in that higher echelon of individuals, several $1 million, maybe 8-figure business, and they kind of look at acquisition and that kind of channel. So my question, JD, is where have you found resources? What resources have you found? Mentors, masterminds, groups, people, community that have helped you kind of reorchestrate your mind from, like you said, that business owner from day to day to more of, okay, hey, more of that larger, okay, I'm acquiring, and what's the proper way of doing it? What kind of resources? What kind of training?
Well, I'll tell you this, a great saying I heard recently was your network is your net worth, right? So it really does, when you start getting to these levels of in your business, when you start zooming out and want to acquire, that's a whole different level, right? That's like being a residential real estate agent and then saying, oh, I'm gonna go do commercial real estate tomorrow. No, you're not. It is a whole new level. Not that you can't transition to there, but you got to know people you got to have, it's a different skill set. It might be in the same, general industry, but it's a whole different set of people with a whole different mindset, with a whole different level, working with different money. And if you've only been in residential real estate your whole life and you want to try to make a transition to commercial real estate, you're in for a shock, right? And I know I just have a ton of friends in real estate. It's like, I've researched this, I hear this a lot from them. And it's the same thing kind of happens when you go from agency owner to acquiring more agencies. It's a completely different game. Where we come up with the money. I mean, there's money everywhere, right? You can get the money from banks, SBA loans. In this other case too, I have partners that have a network of like private equity and things like that. Again, but that's who right? I actually met the person who we're doing the deal together with through a entrepreneurs network that I'm in, right? And so, and that was not a cheap thing to pay for. It's thousands of dollars a year to get into that group. But someone once said, if you want to be in a better room, sometimes you got to buy your way into it, right? And that's the fact. I recommend anyone who wants to level up into a certain area that they're not used to, you're gonna need that network. So find out which groups or networking groups, and if it costs money, pay it. It's worth it in itself. If there's a mentor or someone you can drop yourself in their shirt pocket that's like a billionaire, if you just happen to get introduced to one, whatever you have to do to get their time, do it, period. Because you're not going to be able to understand or even work within those kind of new realms without that. And then self-education. I learned more through self-education than I ever did in my regular college days, right? Because information updates. Udemy is such a great website. Udemy.com. It is amazing what you can learn on a video course there for like $100 or less. That would take you years, to figure out on your own, right? So I mean, if you're looking for some easy, cheaper solutions to just understand something better, go take a video course. Udemy.com is a great spot. I mean, I'm sure there's other places, but that's a really good one.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I have realized this at a very young age. Just like you said, network is your net worth and so forth. But like you understand that when you're going like specifically real estate, right? Realtor.com, those are never the good deals, right? A lot of the good deals never even make it on Realtor, Zulu, whatever, Zillow, whatever, all the other
Yeah.
ones, right? It's the same concept with obviously what you're saying, JC, is when there's an offer, there's a business on sale, and sometimes, as you've probably discovered, sometimes they're not even looking to sell, but maybe when the offer and the right numbers present themselves, sure, I could go golf for the rest of my life, right? You just pay me a piece of money. But the thing is what I think is so interesting is just the resourcefulness, and that's what my main question was. Is like, obviously this is a whole different level, and I know people that have acquired different Instagram accounts and those assets, right? Different acquiring, larger businesses, and of course, and things like that. I've never done it myself, but it's really cool to talk to someone like yourself that's in the process, that's doing it and making those deals. Now, like you said many times, you say you want to have several running at a time, right? Different offers out there on the table, because like you said, and I totally get this, it becomes non-emotional, it becomes just transactional, right? Hey, no worries, cool, move on. There's 10 other deals out there. JC, when you're working with this, you probably have a team in place and so forth. But how many can you normally look at? Are you pushing out like 30 offers, and then out of those 30, 10, and then maybe one or two, you actually say, hey, let's talk negotiation? Or what does that look like? Just the number structure, just so people have that right expectation. Like when you're talking numbers, this is the quantity.
Well, I'm not an expert on the topic, so I'll just kind of give you where my thoughts are on it personally. And that is that, in my opinion, you don't, it's not like you can just wave a magic wand and get and have 10 prospective, selling companies tomorrow. You're gonna have to do your own lead gen for it. Again, there's only so many that are in brokers, and you don't want just brokers. You want to also have those side deals. I think the concept is just try to get as many conversations going as you possibly can. Trust me when I say that most of them will fall off no matter what, because they're going to be immediately disqualified based on things that you're looking for, right? So it's not a matter of like, oh, you want to have 100 conversations, and you want to have 10 letters of intent, and you want to have 3 right there, because number 2 is, at some point you might not be able to afford to do 3 at one time, nor would you want to take it on anyway. So you might have to drop out of one also, right? And say, okay, hey, listen, we found a better deal over here, and then you drop out. There's no love lost. Someone's going to buy that company. You don't have to worry about it. They're not going to go broke tomorrow. Clearly, they're doing well enough to where they can sell. Awesome. So I think the point is just that, to get as many conversations going as you can, until the cream rises to the top, so to speak. And you don't have to freak out. You're not going to have, I can guarantee you're not going to have 10 deals that are great, that meet all of your requirements, that are all about to sign on the same day. And you go, oh my God, what do I do? It's not going to happen. You're going to end up whittling it down to one anyway, right? It's just the nature of how many of what you're looking for versus what they're willing to give or give up, or what they are as a company. Just you want to have as many of the conversations you can. There is no top limit. And all of them that look good, go to the next stage. Just keep doing it. You can back out at the very last second. If you have 3, if you accidentally, somehow miracle wise, have 3 that are like, oh my gosh, they love the offer. Because remember, you're making the offers because you're like, well, maybe they won't take it. And let's say you do 3 great offers and these 3 great companies, they all say yes and they're ready to go. Okay, now you just sit back and go, all right, well, what 2 am I going to cut? That's business. That's the way it goes. Are you wasting their time? No, they've got other companies that they're talking to also. Like, they're okay, right? The entire point was that you're looking at companies that are cash flow positive. They're not going to, miss their mortgage tomorrow. You don't have to get emotional about it. So if some crazy scenario happened and you had multiple that you could literally pull the trigger on, just, pick the one that you like the best and sign the documents, right? Now you've got one. And you can always come back to those if they happen to be up for sale later. You never know.
That's awesome. I love this insight, man. Just kind of dive into this because again, it's a channel. Everybody always talks about like YouTube and Facebook and ads and return and all that stuff. But like this channel is just so undervalued, right? A lot of people just are not aware of it. They don't know how to structure it. They don't know how to really produce it because they think these other channels are a lot easier, if you will. But once you're at that level, like you are, JC, now it really the game gets fun. And I've heard and I've read books and interviews about Warren Buffett and how he structures his deals and his processes and the way he filters hundreds upon hundreds of deals, and he only chooses 1 or 2 maybe every 2 years, right? In acquiring a company. So it's just remarkable to always have that long-term gameplay. So JC, before we let you go, again, just the immense value that you brought. I really appreciate it. Just talking specifically about acquisition, but I do know that you obviously run a very, very incredible marketing agency and being able to help a lot of business owners really scale their life. But how can our audience reach out to you, just be part of your community, be part of kind of your agency and so forth?
Yeah. Well, our website is infinitymgroup.com. The M obviously standing for marketing. They can email me, jc@infinitymgroup.com, or connect with me on LinkedIn, just JC Granger with the periods, the initial style on there. So if anyone wants to get a hold of me for either talking acquisitions, they're looking to maybe sell, right? Or if they are a company looking for lead generation, that's what we do as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And guys, make sure those links will be in the description below. So make sure you obviously, click on this, make sure you reach out to him and just be part of that community. JC, before we let you go though fully, is there any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
I would say, I've been reading a couple of books recently that really hit me hard. And I think that it's really important to make sure you're always self-educating and reading about the things that are what you want to do. Like, I read a book recently called Relentless, which was amazing. I'm going to read it again. It was that good. Another book I'm reading right now by David Goggins called You Can't Hurt Me. And it's just about because the thing is, when you're a business owner, especially after we had, a whole pandemic, a lot of people were real beat up, right? They took hard hits no matter what, right? There's a couple industries that did better because of it, but the rest got beat up a lot. And I think it's important to really reemphasize your core values. Like, why are you doing this, right? To really pump yourself back up and be able to pick yourself off the floor. Because the fact is that the only people in this world that are going to really, really make it are the ones who just are relentless and never give up. And they push harder when everything tells them that they should stop, and everyone tells them they should stop. If you have a 1% mentality, and I don't mean financially, I mean just you're that person who sees, the matrix, so to speak, and that you're that person. That means that the other 99% of the people around you, they don't. So they can't relate, and they're not necessarily trying to bring you down. I think a lot of people talk about how don't let people bring you down and don't let the negativity. I don't see it that way. I think they just see things differently. I think we see things differently, right? I think that some people are trying to be safer. Sometimes people are being negative to try to protect you, right? Not everyone who says something mean or negative is there to hurt you. Not everyone who says something positive there is there to help you either. I think we've all met those people too, right? So don't forget, it could go either way. I think it's on you to make sure that you're doing everything you can to pump yourself up and to stay resilient and relentless, and to have that, never say die, mentality kind of thing. Because when you're working on big deals, like if you're doing acquisitions, it's hard. Growing an agency from the ground up is hard. Everything's going to be hard. You have the burden of performance on you when you're at the top. Heavy is the crown, that sits on the king's head. That's just the way it is. There's no one that's going to help you. Like, you just have to do it yourself. But like you said, having a good network and making sure that you surround yourself with the right people, if you surround yourself with other 1% mentalities, well, now you are around people who get it, right? So I'd say, definitely work on your network, and then those people will help build you up, and then that can become your net worth.
Awesome. And guys, that is JC Granger. My man, thank you so much for joining. And that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Yo, this is Christian D. Evans, Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. We thank you so much for listening to this amazing episode. If you feel and you know that this was valuable to you, please show some love to our amazing guest by liking this, by commenting on this, by making sure that you do a nice 5-star review, and just show some love to our guest. That'd be really awesome. Also, make sure you share this with a friend, a family, a colleague, someone that you believe would bring value to their life right now. And guys, we just want to say thank you again for just being part of our community. If you want to have more resources, don't be afraid. Go to christiandevans.com. You can actually schedule a phone call with me, or you can send me an email at christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. That's christian.evans@beUncommonIfYouCan.com. Always love to hear some feedback, and let me know what is the number 1 or 2 things that you are struggling in your business and your life, and we'll make sure we have those conversations. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast, and until next time, remember, be uncommon if you can. Cheers.